So for my comprehensive project, I wanted to do something that was a little uh, different for me, which is I'm not a big art kind of person. But I wanted to do something colorful and something kind of fun for this project. So what I did was I made all these little puzzle pieces and drew them on to the poster board, and each of them is a various component of what I have learned this year and what has made this class a personal success for me. And so it's hard to make out, but down here in the bottom, I have my name. And the reason I put my name on there is because as a teacher, I think you're the single most important part of a child's education. You're in charge of getting them into interventions and getting them the resources that they need if they need extra resources for reading or math or whatever. So I put that in the corner because to me that's the most important part. That's the cornerstone of any good intervention is going to be the teacher. And then the next part I put on, I have my student Micah here and my student Malachi here because without students, I mean, you're not going to be able to implement any of the stuff that we've learned over the course. So it's really important to have them on there. It sounds silly, but a big part of education is seeing the growth in your kids and seeing the success that you want out of those kids, and you're not going to be there without it. And if it wasn't for Micah and Malachi this year, I would not be aware of a lot of the things that I am now aware of. That's for sure. They really opened my eyes to a lot of concerns of mine about teaching and things I need to get better about and things I can improve on. So I'm glad that I had those kids, and I'm glad that we were able to work together, even if it wasn't always fun for them and wasn't always enjoyable in the sense that they were struggling for me. And then up here I have assessment. And assessment is huge because that's where we see, as I've said before, those successes from your kids. You're not going to be able to get the growth you want out of your kids if you don't have good assessments. If you don't have well thought out, rigorous, assessments for your kids to look at to grow and to become better readers, you need assessments. And to do that without that piece is just impossible, in my opinion. So I'm glad that it's on there. They weren't always fun to implement, they weren't always fun to come up with, and they were certainly very difficult, but they were huge parts of this course. And right above assessment, I have the Dibbles because that was the first assessment that we did. And it gave us our baseline for the kids, and it gave us the information that we needed to be successful in class. I wouldn't have the baseline or the data that I would have needed to start with my kids. Malachi was significantly lower than Micah, and if I had just tried to go into tutoring and say, okay, here's what we're both going to do. You're both going to do this assessment. You're both going to do this assignment. I wouldn't have been good for Malachi. So, having those assessments on there that are tailored to show the weaknesses in the kids so that you know what they need to work on are huge. Next, I have dyslexia right here, and dyslexia was a big one for me. We talked about that for quite a while, and in my opinion, it was one of the biggest eye-opening things we learned about in this quarter. Not because I wasn't aware of dyslexia, but I was not aware of just how many people have it. It's got 3 million cases a year, and it affects people of all ages and people of all intelligences, and it's not relegated to a certain group of disabled children or disabled people. Anyone can have it. And that checklist we have for dyslexia was huge. It was being able to find those triggers, the trouble with the rhyming words and trouble with the letter sounds and identifying those markers, I mean, goes back to assessment again. You can't be successful in those assessments as a student if you are struggling with a learning disability. And another learning disability that was really important we learned about was dysgraphia, those writing disabilities, because writing is a huge part of reading literacy too. And if you're not able to write, if you have a writing disability, you're not going to be as successful as you want to be. And that was another huge part of our, um, learning this quarter. I also have the past assessment on here, and I have TORP on there as well. And I think those are important because any kind of assessment that really gives you any sort of data is going to be good for you to have. But the TORP was good for me because it was not only was it interesting to see what my philosophy on literacy intervention was, but to know where that philosophy puts you and where you stand as an educator is a big, huge thing for me. And then last but not least, I left the medal intentionally blank. And I did that because you have all of these puzzle pieces put together to make you into an educator, and it's part of your utility belt, because teachers are superheroes. And so Batman's got his utility belt, and as a teacher, you have to have this utility belt. And all of this is put together to fight the middle there, that great unknown of what your child in your intervention, your student is facing. You don't know. There could be home life issues, there could be disabilities, and all sorts of things. And you have to use everything that we've learned and put all this stuff together to get to the center of the problem. And that white unknown is always going to be our biggest thing as an educator, is to find out what that unknown is and eventually conquer it.